emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 789.IS5707, certificate number 48941. Warren Miller.
Then John stems and somehow manages to turn, but he's only skiing on air. Touches the snow just long enough to jump for his life the second time. He's finally back on the snow, gets his heart out of his mouth, and makes turns as though nothing had happened.
Ken, what's your sport? If you had to pick one sport that is your sport, and I don't mean televised sport that you watch, I mean sport that you participate in.
Does categories count as a sport? I'm pretty good.
Pretty close to a sport. I would call it a sport these days. I mean, Dungeons and Dragons is a sport these days.
I would say of the sports I actually play recreationally regularly enough to be like, I'm terrible at this, but I'm good enough to do for fun.
Run around Green Lake.
That's not really a sport.
It is.
Like self-punishment.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
All those guys that say it's a sport, they're just like, I don't know.
I walked around Green Lake the other day, and it's a long way.
3 miles.
I was tired.
It's like a 5K, yeah. Our dog, we have a dog that can't do it anymore. If it's a hot day, we have one dog that you have to like pick up by the handle on his little leash thing. And,
well, that makes it even more of a workout for you.
Yeah, then you're like pressing a spaniel mix as you walk.
Right.
I would say ping pong and basketball are really the only sports. First of all, they're both sports you can, play with 0 or 1 other people. Ping pong's a little hard with 0, but and you don't have to be that good, which I'm not.
But you can go out and entertain yourself shooting baskets.
Oh yeah, for hours. If you get in, especially if you get in some kind of flow state, where you're like, wow, I've got the right music in my earbuds and everything's going in.
I am not very good at shooting baskets.
I don't think I am either.
So bad that I don't find it entertaining.
Is your free throw percentage above or below the Shaquille O'Neal line?
What is the Shaquille O'Neal?
He's
bad. He's bad.
It's like 530 career or something.
No, I'm bad. I sit and throw the basketball at the hoop and at the backboard.
Well, that's the problem.
In various different combinations, and it's just
never once gone in.
Good job, friend. Go find another thing to do. But I love ping pong.
Ping pong's fun.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm super great at it, but I've played it, my whole life, ping pong.
It was the only sport where weirdly I was like, oh, this is going to be like all these other sports I've tried where like, I try golf and I can't even like drive the ball. It's going to be like that. And immediately I was like, oh no, this is like
ping pong, ping pong, ping pong.
Is that why it's called that?
That's right in the name, yeah.
I thought it was some racist reason.
Nope.
Well, that's a relief.
Yeah, no, you choose which one you're going to be. Am I the ping or am I the pong? Ping, pong, ping,
Sometimes
pong,
you don't know. Sometimes the universe decides. Some days you're the ping, some days you're the pong.
That's right. Some days the ping is inside the house.
But is there a sport? Again, I guess you're going to get to this by saying skiing is where you feel like your true self, where the equipment is an extension of your being and you get in some kind of Zen state.
My 2 sports, if I were going to pick 2, are skiing and frisbee.
Have you ever combined them?
Wow. Have I? I mean, when you say that, I think to myself, yes, surely I have.
Somebody has been skisbeeing, but I don't know how it works.
But then I think about it, have I ever really? And I'm not sure that I have. I've definitely played a lot of frisbee in the snow, but have I been on skis? No, I don't think so.
I would not have thought of frisbee as a sport because I never played ultimate in college or anything. But it's true that I think there's a Dave Eggers book that points out that like Frisbee really is a sport where you can get the thing to go further than you would imagine the human body could do.
Yeah.
So you really do get some sense of what great athletes get out of that without being a great athlete.
Well, you can be a great Frisbee athlete. And I'm not even talking about ultimate. And, Seattle is one of the leading cities in the world promoting the sport of ultimate.
We're very proud.
Yeah.
I've lived next to 2 Frisbee golf courses in my time in Seattle.
And ultimate is an extremely athletic sport. And Frisbee golf is its own totally cool thing. But, I was a Frisbee, like a purist, which is you and some friends go out into a large park and you throw a 165 disc at one another.
Make a big triangle or line.
Yeah, and for hours, where you just are like, zoom.
But you can really hurl it and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, if aerodynamics helps me,
Yeah.
there's a thing on this planet that I can throw 500 feet.
And not only throw it 500 feet, but get it right into someone's hands, like where they're not even moving, where you're just like, here it comes.
That's how baseball pitchers must feel, where they're doing this crazy out of control motion, but they can get the ball within a millimeter when it's landing.
Yeah.
And you can get that with a Frisbee, where you're really just, doing this full body motion, and yet your brain can just put it somewhere.
Yeah, Ichiro can put a baseball through a baseball-sized hole that's like 350 feet away. And all those great athletes. But I guess here's a question. Would you call standing out in a park and throwing a baseball, playing catch, as we say here in the West, not having a catch?
Having a catch?
Which is a terrible coinage.
What is that, Midwestern?
No, it's East Coast. They all have a catch.
Well,
this is one of those
they all get to be president.
Some kind of regional idiom in the United States.
A catch?
Yeah, have a catch.
It seems like you're going to throw it once.
Well, yeah, or what do you mean have it?
They also say waiting online, so...
Oh, yeah, waiting on instead of in line.
They've got some problems.
And we say playing catch, which is what you're doing. But would you consider that a sport, going out with your dad and throwing a ball around?
Sure. I mean, I'm shooting baskets and not without playing competitively, so sure.
But throwing Frisbee, because I played ultimate, but I was too fat and too slow.
And you're actually saying Frisbee instead of flying disc, so good for you.
Oh, who says flying
I
disc?
think the kids, that's why they say ultimate instead of ultimate Frisbee.
Oh.
They say disc golf. They're leaving off the...
No, it's Frisbee.
And maybe because they're using more specialized brands. A true ultimate player would never use a Frisbee brand flying disc.
No, of course they would.
Would they?
Well, if they don't, what the heck are they even? They need
because
to
there's all these
look at
high end
themselves in the
tools.
mirror.
Like if you play disc golf, you go out and you get your putter and you get your driver, and these are all made by weird little artisanal companies that are 3D printing specialized Frisbees for you.
Yeah, that are copying the wonderful inimitable Frisbee disc by Whammo.
Frisbee pie. It's named after a pie plate, right? There was a Frisbee company, like a last name, that made a pie plate, and I think that's how the Frisbee.
That's
got
how the
its
name came.
I think.
In Alaska we say snow machine instead of snowmobile.
Snow machine.
Yeah, and that infuriates everyone in the world.
Because a snow machine is something else.
No, a snow machine is what you would say is
a snow machine
snowmobile.
makes snow.
Well,
like one of the,
that's
what do you call
snowmaker?
Really? It is?
I mean, it's not a snow machine because that is a.
The fact
like
that you would take a vehicle and call it a
device.
machine is very funny to me. It would be like, yeah, we call a boat a water machine. I call this sedan an asphalt machine.
A
Why?
water machine.
That's not weird.
You're a water machine. But yes, skiing is the sport at which I was if you can say that I ever excelled at a sport, skiing is the thing that I came the closest to being good at. At one point, very briefly, when I was a sophomore in high school, I was a nationally ranked skier. I was in the top 500 skiers in America in giant slalom in my age group. And by top 500, I mean just eking into the top 500.
Yeah, that's a thing where people will never say, I'm in the top 10. Yeah, that doesn't mean they were number 4. If you say I'm in the top 10, you're 9 or 10.
Yeah, that's right. And I was 400 and change. And I was on a ski team with a lot of great skiers, so that there were There were skiers I was competing with and skiers who were friends that were in the top ranked skiers. And we always put skiers on the Olympic team. And of course, a skier from my generation went on to win the Olympic downhill, Tommy Moe.
And he was ranked ahead of you, probably.
He was way ahead of me. He was always a much better skier even when we were children. Tommy Moe was just one of those poetry on skis type of skiers where you could see him you'd be standing at the bottom and he would be at the top and he'd make two turns and you're like, oh, well, that's Tommy. And there were lots of skiers in our team. And I grew up at Mount Alyeska in Alaska. A lot of skiers on our team that had a real grace. And, ski resorts produce generations of skiers.
Is that right?
Yeah.
With different schools and techniques or just...
Well, and it's also that tendency that you have where one person gets really good and then all of a sudden everybody around them can do a thing that didn't used to seem possible, but now there are 15 people that can run a 4-minute mile when for 50,000 years nobody could do it and it seemed impossible, and now...
Some probability field broke and now everybody
can do it.
Yeah.
So, but you'll see, these are the years that everybody's coming out of, weirdly, East Coast ski resorts. And in the United States, the East Coast, the Appalachian Mountains, are famously really bad.
It's not where you want to go.
Really
ski.
Bad skiing.
I guess I thought we had just done that one ski show about, what was it, narrow, what are they called?
Wide skis.
Wide skis, which we did, let's see.
Are you saying we've done more than one ski show already?
You will not believe this, but I did a skiing show.
Oh, what was your skiing show?
Yeah, it was about some friend of my son's had an idea for a abortive attempt to put skiing in Missouri in the 70s.
Oh, sure. That's right. The Flat Hills Ski Resort. Yeah. Well, have I told all these anecdotes about skiing? I probably have.
I feel like
I've mentioned Tommy Moe, I'm sure.
In April 2019, I think people might have heard that you were ranked top 500. But to your credit, you don't just drop that into other shows.
Not like some things.
Like if we're talking about Les Paul guitars, you're not like, well, unlike my expertise at skiing, in which I was the top 500.
My sister was an exceptional skier and was a very she was a skier that was attracting a lot of notice, and she abandoned skiing in her teenage years as an act of rebellion.
Yeah,
and went to what at the time was a brand new sport of snowboarding. And
what do you guys call snowboards in Alaska? Snow globes?
What did we had a weird name for them. No, snowboards.
Okay.
I mean, the thing is, the less we talk about snowboards, the better. And I know I just scalded the ears of everyone that's under 50 years old listening to the program.
Anybody who's really into snowboarding is so high, they're not going to come after us.
But I was in my late teens before I ever saw a snowboard. I was probably 17 before.
But that's because you're old, not because
right.
because there's anything wrong with snowboards.
But snowboarding was only just invented, and so I didn't grow up as a kid. My relationship to the fall line is that I face down it, not that I stand sideways against it. And
do you think that's a whole psychological problem?
I do.
Today's kids are facing sideways relative to the fall line, and it's breaking their brains.
Well, they actually do face the fall line. They face downhill. They're just standing athwart it.
Their feet are parallel.
Yeah, so as they move, although they're looking down, they're moving against the grain.
Well, those kids are snowboarding natives.
They are.
They grew up in a world that didn't have snowboards.
They are. They're skaters and they're surfers and they're snowboarders, and they're all doing the same thing. They're all standing on the board but going sideways.
On different surfaces, different machines, you might say.
When snowboarding became popular, I several times would be with a group of snowboarders on skis, and I would follow them down the mountain. And this was a mountain I knew like the back of my hand. But just the way they approached the mountain was so different that it felt like I was skiing on a completely new... I had no idea where I was. Even as I looked around and knew exactly where I was, I'm following them on what we would call a line, where I just would not have gone this way. I wouldn't have approached these trees this way. I wouldn't have thought of the mountain this way.
Can you get the same effect with mushrooms?
Yes.
Well, there you go. That seems easier.
Especially if you're doing that and are on mushrooms. It's like a woo! and listening to Love and Rockets in your headphones. Then you're just
Is that your skiing music?
no. I couldn't listen to music.
I was wondering if that's
skiing.
a thing.
No,
People did have Walkmans?
Oh, most people love it. They had Walkmans and
Boom boxes over their shoulders?
not that, but they did have bone phones. Briefly.
Oh, I remember the bone phone.
Yeah,
We've talked about that.
Yeah,
right?
we should do an episode on the bone phone and other technologies that didn't quite cut it.
I don't want any technology that vibrates my skeleton in order to make me hear
Music inside your
talking heads. Literally talking heads.
But no, I didn't like the distraction of having music playing, and also I don't like changing batteries. I never did. Right. And so, the first Walkman I got as a present. It was an off-brand Walkman that also had an AM/FM radio.
I think I got a Panasonic Walkman. I never had a Sony Walkman. I'll say it now. We always got the cheaper one.
Yeah, we always got the cheap one. But I remember I was at Space Station, which was the video game parlor in Anchorage, and I was walking home along Fireweed Lane, which was a couple of miles from Space Station to my house, on the other side of Northern Lights Boulevard. Or no, I'm sorry, on the other side of the Seward Highway.
Take note.
For Alaskans,
Take note, listeners.
I lived on Ingra at the time, and I was walking from Spenard, and I had my Walkman on, and I was listening to, I don't know, I had a bunch of tapes at the time, and probably it was
Ozzy.
Well, yeah, it was Iron Maiden's Killers on one side and maybe British Steel on the other side. And I'm walking, I'm just thinking, this is the greatest thing in the world, like rock and roll. And I'm just walking down the street, and then the batteries died. And I don't know if I ever put new batteries in it. I felt like it was a one-time...
Your youth ended.
Like, well, that was fun while it lasted, but batteries are expensive. Nobody's going to be buying me AA batteries all day.
Didn't you say this is why you never had a Discman? Because you can listen to like a CD 3 times and then you're like, it needs new batteries. And it takes 4.
I'm not going to do that. I'm not here to support big battery.
That's good. You love the earth.
I do. But, I grew up skiing at a time of transition when ski resorts in the 1970s were still, a lot of them, pretty country. They were, it was not yet, it was always a kind of exclusive sport in the sense that it required a bunch of gear,
expensive gear, yeah.
And you had to be out in the middle of nowhere, and you couldn't. It just even thinking about skiing kind of required that you be outdoor. It's an outdoor sport. It's not something you go outside in your backyard and shoot hoops.
But like in most cities, middle class kids were not getting lessons.
Yeah, in most cities, it's a long way to the nearest place you could ski. And so ski resorts were a cottage industry and like literally cottages, right? You'd have a little chalet or a little shack, a little one-room house kind of up in the trees somewhere. And then around the resort itself, there would be some small hotel rooms. It wasn't yet this industry of like massive sort of luxury and expense. It always cost money, right? But it was a cowboy sport still. And there were not that many resorts in the world, and a lot of them felt like they were pretty ramshackle. The lifts were all powered by surplus diesel engines that someone had found on a pallet after World War II, and they built these, the Riblet company, which built the lifts, was a Washington company. It was in Spokane. And, in the 60s, you could still kind of do a road trip around the American West and more or less skiing every resort in the West. You could do a pretty tight loop. There were 4 resorts in Colorado and 2 in Utah. So
what changed?
Money.
That rich people started doing it on vacations.
Well,
or they already were, but there were more of them? Or?
The Alps had always been a little bit more, there was an more exclusive element.
This is where the jet set goes.
Yeah, an aristocratic thing. And that was what made the American West feel much more American. It was homegrown. And the distances were further. It's easier to get to Chamonix from 10 major European cities than it is to get to Park City.
Vail, yeah.
But my resort, Anchorage, Mount Alyeska, was as far away from any other where as you could be, pretty much. And the streets in the resort were all dirt.
I mean, that's going to be a different crowd than who's skiing at Aspen, even contemporaneously, right? Because nobody's going there destination-wise to ski there. In
the 70s, of course, Aspen and Vail were very popular places for the hippie jet set, the fur coat, sort of Hunter S. Thompson dropout culture, because Colorado was...
They're still there, by the way. They never left.
Is that right?
I think so.
To my great chagrin, I have not skied that many places. I've never skied in Europe. I've never skied in Colorado.
You should ski across Europe.
It would be nice, except the other day, I think I told you, I had this bad knee and was looking for some kind of doctor who would give me...
You just wanted an MRI. You're a simple guy.
And I went through I have a local doctor, and I went to him when I first was injured to try and get a prescription to see an orthopedist. And he said, he checked my knee and he was like, yeah, your ACL is bunked, but it's still there. I'll write you a prescription, but it's going to be expensive. And all that doctor is going to tell you is what I'm telling you, which is you're 54 years old. There's nothing you can do about it. Go to the gym and stretch and try and live your life. And I was like, I refuse to accept your consultation on this matter.
You want arthroscopic surgery? Is that
that's
what you're hoping for?
Well, no, what I wanted was like a knee doctor.
Yeah, but what's he going to say? Arthroscopic surgery, right?
Well, and so I went through this whole process. I got an MRI. I went to this expensive doctor. It ends up the insurance didn't cover any of it. It's a huge bill.
Yuck.
They did an MRI, and I went to see and the orthopedist checked my knee and was like, well, your ACL is fine, but there's, you probably have a tear in your meniscus or something. That's causing you the problem. He got the MRI back, and he said, I want you to take a look at this. And he scrolled through the MRI, and it meant nothing to me. And he said, you have no ACL in your left knee. Not only do you not have the anterior cruciate ligament, but you have not had one for, I'm not going to say how long, but more than a decade.
Let's just say Bill Clinton was president.
And I'm like,
Did aliens take it?
No.
Where'd it go?
I thought back to when I probably lost my ACL, and it was 30 years ago. And he said, I know that it happened a long time ago because there's no like little bits of ACL hanging on. There's nothing. And I said, how is it possible that I don't have an ACL? And he said, well, on a bell curve of people, there are some people without an ACL that wouldn't be able to walk. Most people would be in pain and would fall down and it would be dislocating all the time. And then there are
some superhuman.
Some small group of weirdos like you that can walk around for 30 years with no ACL and
not even notice.
Kind of not notice. I mean, my knee has always given me problems. I favor it, but I have skied all these years. I don't know if you know this, walked across Europe, Ken.
At least once.
Yeah, months and months of just doing nothing but walking on a knee that had no...
half the time, you're walking on that knee.
That's exactly right.
The other half, you're not. The other half, you're walking on the other knee.
I made a real point to not limp across Europe. Like, I walked.
Because you didn't want to tell the story that way. Ken, did I ever tell you the time I limped across Europe?
Well, and I knew that like your physiology, your body geometry really would change if you didn't...
Sure.
If you weren't mindful. And when I say you, I mean me. If I wasn't mindful of like making sure my gait was straight.
I have a trainer and he still yells at me every day because I wore my backpack over one shoulder in elementary school and high school. And as a result, my hips and shoulders are like a trapezoid. And one should not do that.
No, one should not.
He's angry at me.
But yeah,
You think you're not skiing anymore? Your skiing days are over?
Well, so then the orthopedist says, and this is, basically what I paid him, $6,000. All of medicine and dentistry is a racket, Ken. I don't know if you know this, but it's all a big scam. It's a virus, viruses are real, and getting inoculated That's real.
Vaccines are real. So drugstores are real.
Drugstores
But
are a scam.
Anything above the pharmacist is...
No, they could give you vaccines just in the aisle at Fred Meyer, just in the cold medicine, because cold medicine's real.
That's why they have to lock it up.
That's right.
If it wasn't real,
But
you couldn't make meth out of it.
Dentistry is just invented. There's absolutely zero independent evidence that you need.
In fact, teeth don't exist.
Well, I mean, they clearly do.
Teach the controversy.
Some of mine don't because of all the violence.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't be asking you for your take on dentistry.
Listen, there are a lot of things about my body that are a result of youthful violence, and I'm ashamed, but also I have to own it now.
But some of us need
And by
dentists.
violence, I don't mean I was a victim of violence. I don't mean that I was
Some of it could be both. You could have been perpetrating the violence on your own teeth.
Yeah, I was hardly instigating the violence. Maybe a little, maybe 10%. But so what he said as I left his office was, I wish if I could do anything right now, it would be to go back 20 minutes in time and not tell you that you don't have an ACL. Because I don't want it to affect how you live. You need to keep living as you were, which was thinking that you had an ACL.
Because that kept you going. It was,
Yeah, and now if you're like, oh, I can't do that because then
you're going to start...
Yeah.
You're not going to put any weight on it. And
Yeah, now you're going to limp around, and that's going to make your life worse.
it's like the
than if
magic
you just-
feather in Dumbo.
It's the magic feather in Dumbo.
Dumbo, the magic feather. It was all a gag. That's
So-
my impression of the mouse in Dumbo.
That's why I'm now deliberating whether or not I should ski across Europe. But I watched the ski industry change from the mid 70s to the late 80s, and we talked about it on the wide ski episode that eventually the actual technology of skiing changed.
Right.
But the culture of skiing changed during that period and went from being a cowboy sport to being not just a big money sport, but like a luxe sport and also, the talent in skiing and extreme skiing became a sport, which is a whole other, like, take me to the craziest place in the world and I'm going to ski down it.
Helicopter me to the top of this glacier.
Yeah, and I'm going to be doing backflips while while an avalanche is like right on my heels, an avalanche that could kill me and that might kill others.
But it's going to look great.
That I precipitated, but it's going to be amazing if I'm the one that doesn't die.
So many St. Bernards died, but is this going to be like the NBA in 1950 where like the best skier of the previous generation would just get laughed off the mountain today? Is there like a sea change like that?
No, there were always people in the 1970s and earlier that were doing crazy stunts, backflips but skiing changed so much that now if you're on Instagram and are part of any kind of ski culture, you'll watch people doing
0 for 2 there.
doing like 4 flips in the space that if anybody my generation had even gotten 3 feet of air, just like pulled up their skis and managed to land it, we would have been like, yeah, dude, rad. So
it is kind of like that. Like it's just a different sport. There's like a stratosphere that's opened up.
Completely different sport. And snowboarding, of course, affected that too, because snowboarders were able to do these tricks. And I mean, the first time I went into a half pipe on skis, it was absolutely a bloodbath. It was just like throwing a frog into a blender. I had no...
Is that where your ACL went?
Maybe. There was just no way for me to conceptualize how to ski this terrain. And now you see skiers that are doing extraordinary things in that space. But a big part of how the ski culture changed starting in the 1950s. I mean, skiing is really a post-war phenomenon. Prior to World War II,
one would just walk down the mountain.
Well, there were a lot of alpinists, but it was...
Don't say alpinists.
Alpinists. No, alpinists. Would you say alpinists?
I thought it was alpinist, but what do I know?
Well, you're the Merriam-Webster of our show.
In that I Google it?
Yeah. But also, no, it's that you know how to pronounce from all those, like...
Alpinist.
Alpinist.
So neither, we're both wrong.
And what did I say? Alpinist?
Alpinist.
Alpinists. If you think about the 10th Mountain Division in World War II,
which I constantly am.
they were a ski-based. The raid on the heavy water plant that we talked about a couple of episodes ago, those commandos approached from the backside as alpinists with their cross country skis. But that was the thing, right? The difference between cross country and downhill skiing was not as pronounced. A lot of the people that were skiing on slopes were doing it with
same gear.
Yes, basically the same gear. But after the war, it became a much more popular sport. And these resorts were built this is the can-do spirit of that generation of greatest generation types that came back from the war and were like, well, I'm not suited for a job, and there are so many of us, maybe I should pack up a station wagon and go explore the West. And our show today is about one of those nomadic mid-century American guys who grew up in California and had a kind of what I think now we would call a rough or even, we would certainly call it a dysfunctional family. But
unhappy childhood.
Yeah, an unhappy childhood, a neglected childhood. And maybe we would have even said that as recently as 1989. I don't think prior to 1989 we would have said he had a normal mid-century childhood where his father drank and showed him no affection, and his mother focused on his sisters, and he was basically just left to entertain himself.
That wasn't unhappy because it was everybody.
That was everybody, right? Or at least it was enough people that it didn't stand out. But we're talking today about a Californian by the name of Warren Miller, who grew up kind of surfing in the 1930s, which would have been,
early.
At a time when it was a novel sport in California. But he was a little bit of a latchkey kid who found surfing and found kind of beach bumming as a respite from his unloving home.
I was looking at a photo the other day of Agatha Christie surfing, and I realized surfing just used to be it didn't have a culture. It certainly didn't have a soundtrack. It didn't have an accent. It didn't have all the stereotypes we associate with it today. So it was just an outdoor activity. It was like hiking.
Yeah,
I'm at the beach. I'm going to try surfing as one does.
It had that Hawaiian connection.
Yes,
and so there was a little bit of like a pedal steel guitar or lap steel guitar soundtrack. But by the time it made it to California, it was it hadn't yet, like you say, become like a Beach Boys, and the Hawaiian connection made surfing really blow up after the war too, because all those American servicemen had been in Pearl Harbor.
They discovered it there.
But Warren Miller, working class or middle class kid, his dad had been a broadcaster, but had suffered during the Depression and never really recovered. He went off to World War II, enlisted in the Navy, and prior to the war, he had found a kind of in his teen years had found a safe haven in scouting. He loved the Boy Scouts, and in the course of his Boy Scouting adventures, had been introduced to skiing. Southern California, as you know, now being, having basically spending half your time in Southern California. It's got a couple of really big ski mountains.
Yeah.
The mountains of, the tallest mountain in North America is in Southern California. And so skiing was a Californian sport. And he was taken up there and found that contrary to my scarfing at snowboarders, he found that his surfing kind of athleticism translated to the ski mountain. And he really enjoyed, it was far away from the city. It was this kind of clean mountain air. My sister always said that her most spiritual place is standing on top of a mountain with a ski, either a snowboarder or skis on.
But just right before the run.
Well, and when you think about it, when she first said it to me, I was like, weird. But then I thought about it, like the ski lift is is a pretty extraordinary device in that it takes you in the space of just a dozen minutes to an environment that if you didn't have a ski lift, if you had to hike there, that would be a major accomplishment.
It's basically the rapture. It literally sucks your feet off the ground
and takes you to heaven.
And drops you someplace, that you could never be, a paradisical place.
And especially in midwinter. So to stand on top of a mountain and look out over the world in midwinter and to have gotten there any other way would have been, unless you're an alpinist, that would be kind of a once-in-a-lifetime achievement, but you can do it 15 times in a day.
Right.
And as soon as she said it, I realized, oh, wow, there is that incredible kind of spirituality to being in that sort of environment where you can briefly feel all alone. And
what other sport has it?
Yeah, right. Where else? I mean, I guess like deep sea swimming.
Yeah, scuba is the other thing that people talk about.
Yeah, you're just in an otherworldly kind of environment. But after the war, Warren Miller had a sort of greatest generation. Like I'm not going to just fall into a standard life, right? And we saw that at the foundation of a lot of American culture that we now think of as intrinsically American, specifically like biker culture, beatnik culture, jazz culture, or modern jazz culture, hipster culture. I mean, all these things really had their roots in that post-war period where there was just this generation of people that had been around the world and came back, and you couldn't keep them down on the farm.
Feeling a little alienated.
So Warren enlisted his old like Southern California surfing buddy, a guy named Ward Baker, and said, hey, let's go up and just ski. And they didn't have any money. They weren't really able to, they weren't doing it as a vacation. He was saying, let's go do this. Let's just go this is how we're going to spend our time. We're guys in our 20s. We're not going to cut it in the rest of the world. They they had a little teardrop trailer, a classic American, basically only as big as two guys and a little kitchenette in the back. And they drove up to Squaw Valley, parked in the parking lot, and spent an entire season just living in the trailer in the parking lot, hiking up. They couldn't afford lift tickets.
Afford the lift.
They'd hike up all day and ski down, just having the time of their lives. They would hunt rabbits.
Wow.
Basically like around the ski resort.
They're not even working odd jobs or?
At the time, just skiing, and gradually they started teaching lessons. They said to high school girls and college girls that would come up, they'd offer to give them ski lessons, and they were handsome guys. And in the course of this like vagabond lifestyle, I mean, Warren Miller was the guy who coined the term ski bum.
Before then, there were there were skiers and there were bums.
Yes.
But he was the Venn diagram intersection.
And I think at that point, post-Depression, bum had a kind of romantic...
Yeah, Dharma bums. It's Kerouacian, it's beatniks.
Yeah, it's Steinbeckian.
Yeah.
There was a sense that being a bum was a different class than being a hobo or a vagrant.
They're kind of reclaiming it. Like, yeah, we don't appreciate your values and your 9-to-5 office life.
Yeah, man. So they drive around in this little teardrop trailer and they visit a bunch of these nascent resorts that have one chairlift that's, powered by a Spitfire engine. and are gradually like both improving their skiing and also, having these, what we now think of as pivotal, like adventure sports experiences. And at this point in time, there was a man named John Jay, who was actually the great grandson of John Jay, Chief Justice of the United States.
The first Chief Justice? Oh.
And John Jay was making ski films. He started making films during World War II that were basically not exactly propaganda films, but like training films for the 10th Mountain Division, right? Showing soldiers what skiing could be and how cool it was. And he actually made a feature-length film called Ski Patrol during the war.
Like not a training film, like an actual mass audience fiction film?
Half and half, right? It's a patriotic film,
Yeah.
but
It might have played theaters, right?
yeah,
Like
but fun. And in fact, he had been, I think, sometime in the early 50s, he actually was nominated for an Oscar for like best short film or best weird
yeah, some
some weird
documentary
Oscar
feature.
for a movie called
Documentary short.
Alpine Safari. So John Jay was making ski movies, and at some point, Warren Miller was exposed to John Jay's movies, and had already, I think, by that point, gotten a movie camera, because he and Ward were filming each other, trying to
Do tricks. And,
and just like improve their form.
oh, I see. Like as a coaching.
Yeah, like check it out. Here's me, and then they would study the film. And Warren Miller was inspired by John Jay and kind of became an acolyte, and did so under the guise of like learning his tricks, and started to make his own ski movies. And he had a more renegade approach to making movies. And they would travel around in this trailer, and more Warren Miller wanted to film skiers, and was less and less teaching and so forth. He had found his calling and started making his own ski movies, which he would tour with the movie and play it at ski resorts. And
Would the resorts, like the resorts are part of this? They'd make a deal with him, like they needed evening entertainment.
Well, or
at-
he'd
back
play in
the lodge
bars
or
at
something?
first. I mean, he was really, it was a cottage industry, but his innovation was that he would narrate them live. He had a podium, he would stand to the side of the stage, and he had this very laconic style where he would make, he had cut the film to his narration in such a way that he showed ski crashes and funny, bloopers, and he had this sort of timing that was very folksy, and he would always sort of land his joke right at the point where the person's skis were coming off. And because he was narrating them live, it became a real attraction as he would make his way around the resorts. And he gradually developed this personal culture where he would show up at a resort, he'd spend all day filming for next year's movie, come down to the lodge, show this year's movie,
Right.
narrate it, and then go to the next ski resort, go up, film all day.
I wonder if he needed permission from the resorts, or was he just kind of guerrilla shooting this up on because they don't care if some guy's got a camera. Right?
No, and this was an 8mm handheld
Right.
film camera, and these were cowboy days. I mean, there wouldn't have been any idea that the resorts would have a copyright about putting out. We filmed a television show at the Chateau Marmont 15 years ago, made 10 episodes of this TV show, and then some representative of the Chateau said, "Oh, you can never say Chateau Marmont in your film because we're not granting you permission." And we were like, the whole point of it is that we're at your hotel. And
did they know, or did you just take gear into?
oh
one
no,
of the
they were
rooms?
like, "Oh, that's great. Film your thing here. That's really hilarious. Absolutely." And then it was only after the whole thing was done
Wow.
that they said, "Oh, you can't mention it." And we were like, "What? Every single person mentions it,
Right.
every other sentence." And so that show got shelved. It's out there somewhere for our listeners who want to see
Dick Cavett.
me, Dick Cavett, and John Hodgman at the Chateau Marmont, which I'm now not. I've already mentioned it 3 times. I wasn't allowed to say it at all.
Don't say it. It's just we're at a major hotel.
Please don't bother Dick Cavett. He's an old man now. Leave him alone.
That should be the name of the show. Don't bother Dick Cavett.
So Warren Miller had his first wife died of cancer, and he in 1955 met a ski bunny, is what we would have said at the time, kind of an affluent, spunky gal by the name of Dorothy, or Dottie. And the two of them had a couple of kids. Warren had a son from his first marriage. And the 3 of them would load up the car with their 3 kids, the station wagon, and they made the family into a part of the films.
Oh,
right?
you'd see them driving to the place. And
Warren was cultivating this whole image of the lighthearted life of a kind of beautiful Americans who just do what they want.
He's a reality star in a time when that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, occasionally you'd see publicity movies of stars on vacation at the Riviera beaches, but the idea that you would just see like an American family going about its fun vacation life, that's a new thing.
Yeah, and he innovated at a lot of levels with this sort of handheld camera. He and a small eventually, his team grew, but the image he presented was my beautiful wife, my 3 lovely children, and I go from resort to resort, just having a great time skiing and filming people doing tricks.
So it's not just look at this great skiing we're seeing, sports fans. It's also like this is kind of aspirational. Like, wouldn't you like this life?
Exactly. And as a part of it, so he's traveling to these resorts and promoting skiing, but also then starts to gradually show his films away from ski resorts at college campuses, places in the Midwest where there isn't skiing. His touring schedule expanded, and he's making a living selling tickets, right? Like he's not, this isn't on television. He shows up at the theater, they charge $8 a head, they sell 350 tickets, and he pockets the money and takes it in a bag and goes to the next town. So he's making it's a real vaudeville.
Yeah, it's cottage industry. He's keeping all the proceeds.
Keeping all the proceeds, and selling the whole myth of the healthy life of the outdoors, of a kind of...
It's a beautiful American West, too.
That's
like
right.
The landscape's the real main character.
A lot of his footage is on sunny days, maybe not surprisingly. And everyone's athletic, and everyone is kind of living their most beautiful life. And then he is funny, and his jokes are dad joke level.
Oh, but does he have sound now? Like, is he?
Well, so he also is scoring the presentation. He's got music. He's got it becomes a more and more sophisticated presentation. For the most part, the films don't have long interview sections. You don't hear a ton of like woohoo.
Right.
There are sound effects, but mostly you're listening to Warren Miller talk about what you're seeing. And he's by this point bald and kind of he's got the smiley eyes of somebody that's been staring into the sun for his adult life.
He's more grandfatherly than...
Well, no, he always had a youthful energy, and part of it was he was still in shape, still skiing, until he was an old man. But like the kind of youthful baldness that we think of from the 1960s.
Yeah, that was a dad back then.
Yeah,
dads were bald.
But there became this kind of recapitulation. The more Warren Miller toured these idyllic films that were funny and absolutely suited for a college auditorium in September.
Yeah.
The skiing was growing alongside him in ways where it was increasingly hard to tell which was the horse and which was the cart. Warren Miller showed the ski world tricks that then precipitated variations on those tricks, showed a lifestyle that then the following year a whole new group of people were pursuing this lifestyle.
It's like he invents this image and then it fulfills itself.
And it fulfills itself. So that by the late 60s and early 70s, and I mean, John Jay continued to make ski movies too until the early 70s. But without Warren Miller's sort of hilarious, folksy narration, they had a different audience and a different appeal. And his folksiness and his goofiness influenced what ski bum culture was, right? Ski bums
They did
are...
what they saw.
And ski bums are an integrated part of American life, right? You think of ski bums as a kind of archetype and a valid one. Every ski resort should have dozens, maybe everybody that works at the resort would describe themselves as a ski bum. And that is, you could argue, a direct product of Warren Miller selling the myth of the ski bum.
It's probably international now. Like you go to Whistler and it's all these Australian kids who have followed their ski bum lodestone to the Canadian Rockies, and they were probably watching these movies. Like it probably helped export it across the world.
Well, and by the end of the 60s, he'd been to every American resort as many times as you could go, and he started to go to the Alps. He started to go around the world, and in a way pioneered around the world skiing. Because now he's showing movies to these Midwestern kids and he's saying, this is what skiing in the Alps is like. This is what skiing in Chile is like.
And people want to go to these places.
Right. And so, and that was my experience in the early and mid 80s was for the first time, skiing was seen as something that wasn't just like go to France on vacation, but go to Argentina to ski, go to Japan.
And isn't he sometimes going to places that aren't resorts at all?
Well, and then that became so, and Warren Miller was the first person to show extreme skiing to people outside of the ski community, which is helicopter skiing, skiing down terrain that would have been considered unskiable, impossibly steep chutes.
Is he still the skier, or does he have more able and athletic skiers than him in the movie?
Oh, so he was always filming other skiers.
Okay,
he wasn't just filming himself.
He's never the main skier.
Early days, you saw him on the slope, and he always appears in the film.
Yeah.
But no, he was always finding the best skiers he could, and those skiers inspired other skiers to become. I mean, there's a whole industry of people whose job it is to do extreme skiing. Now, I don't know if you can picture an extreme skier, but they don't make anything to sell. What they do is they look great, and then that earns them money.
That's half the economy now.
That's
It's
right.
fine.
That earns them money in terms of sponsorships, and it earns them money in terms of appearances. It's just like being a pro athlete of any kind, except not on a team. And that all has its genesis in these films. You know, Warren Miller shows a guy jumping off of a big rock. Next year, a kid jumps off a bigger rock, and Warren Miller is standing there.
And some of them have names and reputations now. They're like
some of them are huge stars.
Well, now you know this guy, but you know him because he's in Warren Miller movies, right?
Well, and then, so again, it's a tumbling dice where by the 80s, the Warren Miller films were huge events.
He would still kind of come through towns, right? Like they weren't distributed like regular movies, right?
No, a Warren Miller film played for a brief engagement.
Yeah.
Warren Miller was there still, and it was like a headlining event. So my first Warren Miller film was my first ever date.
Oh, that's great.
I asked a girl out and said, I'm going to take you to the Warren Miller film Steep and Deep. And she wasn't even really much of a skier, but understood that.
Everyone knew, like, oh yeah, that's a big yearly thing.
And it happened at the West High Auditorium, which sounds like it was at a high school. But the West High Auditorium in Anchorage at the time was one of the big rooms. That's where Ozzy Osbourne played with Randy Rhoads. And we went, and unfortunately for me, it was also the first time I'd ever worn contacts. I'd gotten contact lenses the day before, and I said, I'm wearing my contacts to my first date ever to see Steep and Deep. And I got to the theater, sitting there in the lights go down. I'm with my lady friend who then became my high school girlfriend. And I reached up and rubbed my eye, and my contact lens came out. And I said, excuse me, I have to go to the bathroom. And I went to the bathroom and spent 10 minutes trying to get this contact lens back in my eye.
Oh, it's your first time trying to get it back in.
I had...
You didn't lose the contact, but you couldn't get it back.
No, I had it in my hand, but I had only I'd only ever put them in my eye like twice. Once at the optometrist and once right before going on this date.
This is a sitcom first date.
Yeah, it was awful. And eventually I couldn't get it in and didn't have my contact case because I figured, why would I bring it? And so I just sat in the movie only seeing it out of one eye with an increasingly shriveled contact lens in my hand. First date ever. But by that point in time, I think even outside of the ski community, these were just seen as fun, like comedy. It was before sports bloopers.
Yeah, I was aware of people who were not skiers going to these because you were just going to see the amazing stunts and the amazing landscape and, like sports bloopers.
It's like the wide world of sports, except for an hour and 30 minutes.
It's like you're watching the Olympics, but it's every year instead of every 4 years.
And he had this great kind of style, which was he would open up the film. The film would start, and it would just be like a 3-minute full court press of absolute, like, the best shots of people just doing wild stuff, so that it's like a thrill ride. And then the movie kind of stretches out. And a lot of that footage you see again, but in context, right? And not just the person in the middle of a huge upside down back scratcher. So in the course of his career, he made 38 films. He made a film a year. And he'd experienced a lot of ups and downs in his career. Very early on, because he's a ski bum, he didn't know how to do his banking and he didn't know how to do his financing and whatnot.
He did not have a 401k.
He had hired his mother and sister at one point, the neglectful mother and spoiled sister, to help him with his finances in the early 50s. And at one point, his mom and sister stole $100,000 from him and disappeared. He never saw either of them again.
Oh, hey.
His first wife died of spinal cancer, very early on in their marriage, and left him with a 1.5-year-old son. Wow. And then his wife Dottie, who they were married for 20 years, lived this idyllic life. But the ideal was, as you can imagine,
hard on a marriage?
Well, really hard on a marriage, and eventually, like, you can't actually take your kids around the country all winter long skiing. They do have to go to school. They do have to be raised. Yeah. And he was on tour 280 days a year. So his second marriage ended in divorce. And then he married a third time, and that lasted the rest of his life. But by the 80s, his oldest son, Kurt, was gradually taking over. And there was a sense that his jokes were corny, bordering on...
Oh, were they not okay anymore?
Even in the late 80s, it was sort of like, well, I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, they weren't racist, but
Right.
they were just sort of like laughing at people that were crashing. And so Kurt, by 1989, Kurt had said, "Look, we need to get the Warren Miller ski films now are a giant enterprise. They're earning millions of dollars a year, and Kurt wanted to professionalize. And so,
What did Dad think?
well, Dad had made 38 films, and he was kind of sold a story and understood that the story was, look, you can't keep doing this forever. You've invented a genre of thing, and now it's going to outlive you, but it needs to get with the times. And what that meant, because skiing had changed so much, was sponsorships. There was big money in this now. Corporate sponsorships, the films, resorts probably no longer wanted him showing up with a huge film crew and just taking the best that they had to offer and
Right.
leaving them nothing. So it became a large enterprise, and what Kurt Miller did was streamline it, take out the corn, make it more professional. And this was right after my peak era, right after my first date, right after Steep and Deep. The movies started to get slicker and became kind of a big media enterprise, enough that Kurt eventually sold the whole Warren Miller media, sold it to Time Warner. And
Probably while Warren Miller was still alive, right?
Warren Miller's still alive and was kind of put out to pasture. And most of the connoisseurs of his work felt, predictably, that it had lost its spirit. It had lost the life.
It was a success. It found a new massive audience.
Yeah.
These slicker, more action-filled movies, but
And media was changing. Warren Miller could no longer go around the country to colleges and with his little collapsible podium and narrate.
plus we're getting close to the age of the X Games and stuff that he created, and there were now other outlets for this kind of thing.
That's right. And these movies then, you could now see them whenever you wanted, right? They were and now I think you can watch the whole catalog of Warren Miller probably on YouTube. I don't know. I haven't gone deep I have not seen Steep and Deep since that fateful night.
Is anybody streaming Warren Miller movies? Let's see. Steep and Deep, free on Vudu with commercials.
There you go. But one of the things they did was take out his narration and start interviewing extreme skiers, and it became more of a sports documentary that we would recognize today. Less comedic, Wide World of Sports, and much more like, yeah, man, well, today we're going to go off this thing, and they're not, extreme skiers are not funny,
Hey.
nor are they, I don't know, always the best interviews.
I feel like you're guessing they're not listening to podcasts either.
I bet you there are some extreme skiers who are listening to Omnibus, and maybe some of them are going to write me and go, hey, man.
I'm the intellectual one.
But, they all, I'm sure, even the young ones now, probably were exposed to, if not Warren Miller films then. Well, Warren Miller films continued to be made long after Warren died. And in fact, jumping ahead a little bit, 2023 was the first year that there was not a new Warren Miller movie.
Was this a pandemic thing, or are they just slowing down?
Well, what happened was Time Warner sold Warren Miller Enterprises to like a media clearinghouse called Active Interactive Media that owned skiing, numismatic news, Writer's Digest,
Numismatic news.
popular woodworking, clean eating, yoga journal, and then they sold to the larger media company that owned Outside Magazine, that then changed its name to Outside Inc. Mm-hmm. And Outside did a really good job. Colorado company did a really good job of popularizing this sort of not adventure sports world, but just a world where people want to go to the 14,000-foot mountains of Colorado.
Yeah.
People like to just be cold and wet. because it's rad.
And because you can go to REI and buy nice stuff for it.
That's right. And REI plays a big role in this too. Yeah. But then Outside Media just sold recently or was absorbed by Growth Catalyst Partners.
Venture Capital Fund?
Yeah, and Growth Catalyst Partners.
It's over.
Outside Magazine, now answering to these guys, decided that rather than spend all the money to send crews around the world to film Warren Miller movies, that there was enough stock footage of people doing back scratchers that they can just keep making Warren Miller movies out of
generative AI.
That's right. Basically, there's a never-ending supply of people doing stunts that maybe you haven't seen this angle of, maybe you haven't seen.
So this just turns into yet another story of venture capital ruining something for parts for no reason.
I'm afraid so. The Warren Miller's story, though, ends on a high note. He retires and moves with his third wife, Lori, to Orcas Island.
Hey, beautiful Orcas Island.
And I mean, for a while, he was involved in that Yellowstone, Big Sky, Yellowstone exclusive ski resort club that's outside of Big Sky. And
some members only thing.
Oh, the worst. It was the most exclusive ski resort in the world because you had to buy a $10 million mansion in this housing development to be able to go to it. It had like 600 employees, and there were at max 600 people on the mountain at any given time. I mean, just capitalism run rampant, and it was all like a real estate scam, and the guy went bankrupt. And I don't know what's happening there now. Probably Jeff Bezos is wearing his cowboy hat and skiing down the slopes, doing mad stunts. But Warren moved to Orcas Island and kind of looking for something to do, had so much exposure to, the reciprocal nature of all these adventure sports and X Games and whatnot. He said, you know what Orcas needs is a skate park.
Oh, I did know this.
Yeah, and he used his powers. He went and said, what I want is a skate park designer that lives in his car. And he's in his, at this point, 80s and older, I think. And so he funds and constructs this giant, basically destination level skate park on Orcas Island that is that I think even now is a big feature up there. Have you ever been to you're a San Juan Islander.
I've been to Orcas a couple times, but I'm not sure I've been to the skate park.
The Orcas Island skate park is part of the Orcas Island Recreation District. And let's see.
I'm now looking to see where it is.
Designed by the firms Grindline and Dreamland. And let's see. It's got a giant bowl. It's got something called the Death Box.
It was snowing last time I was on Orcas, but we drove by this.
Yeah.
I remember this.
And so it's it's still a feature up there, and I highly recommend those of you who want to experience the lasting legacy of Warren Miller.
Now, I have never seen. I have to confess, I have never seen a Warren Miller movie. Like I've seen packages about him, such that I've seen a bunch of highlights and I understand the vibe.
Yeah.
Do you know the oeuvre well enough? Like, is there a Warren Miller movie I should start with?
I think that the Warren Miller movies prior to 1989, when his son took over, are the classic. The ones narrated by Warren Miller himself are kind of where you start, and there are gonna be a couple of his jokes where you go, oof, that isn't a modern joke. But I think you can, I think most of his jokes that don't pass muster now are like, if your wife takes you skiing and she doesn't, what's she doing out of the kitchen? Har, har, har. But he's I think a guy with a big heart and a generous spirit. And, I think that he ended his life somewhat just as he never saw his wife and mother again. I think, there was some sadness between Warren and his kids as they changed what he made.
Yeah.
But he was always pretty sanguine about it. He understood his place in the world. So I'd watch Steep and Deep, Ken.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to watch
Take
Steep and-
one contact
I'm
out.
gonna. I have pretty good eyes,
Oh,
but I'm
that's
gonna
right.
like bring a goldfish bowl to the theater so I can look through a distorted left eye, right eye. Do you remember?
I think it was my left eye. Yeah, just look through a Coke bottle on one side, and then with your good eye, sit next to your wife and try and hold her hand, but you can't because there's a contact lens in your hand.
Good times. And that concludes Warren Miller, entry 789.IS5707, certificate number 48941, in the omnibus. As always, we remind you to stay away from social media should it ever rear its head in your era. Certainly don't follow at Ken Jennings, at John Roderick, at Omnibus Project.
Leave it.
If email still exists, you can always drop us a line at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. I want to hear your Warren Miller recommendations.
Yeah, if you have something you take issue with in my show, make sure you tell Ken.
And I'll forward it to John, unless it's really mean. Then I'll save it and do it myself in the addenda show.
Yeah, just think about it for a while.
You can send physical items to P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington.
Looks like you got some mail over there. What do you got?
Let me see. Kate made us a handmade card to celebrate the 102nd anniversary of the Cheez-It.
Oh, thanks, Kate.
She recently learned the New York Times crossword clued Cheez-It as snack cracker since 1921. Was delighted to learn that the Cheez-It was 102 years old and actually put together this card, including cutout
flags,
hand-drawn flags.
hand-drawn Cheez-It.
Very exciting.
Are you do you like Cheez-Its? Are you a Cheez-It
Man.
guy?
I feel like maybe the best food ever invented is the white cheddar Cheez-It. And, those were only invented in the late 90s. The vast majority of people who have ever been born, lived, and died on planet Earth never had a white cheddar Cheez-It.
What's the
Perfect
difference
food.
between a Cheez-It and a goldfish in terms of experience? Like culinary experience?
Whew, I don't know. The goldfish maybe is dusted with the cheese flavoring. It's got that rough coating.
Yes.
And they're puffier and hollow, so you get, if you like that mouthfeel of the goldfish that pops in your mouth.
Well, I think I might be a Cheez-It fella.
Cheez-Its are more intense cheese-wise, I guess. We got
Cheese-wise.
a note from Ty, who in Madrid got to see the Garden of Earthly Delights at the Prado and sent us a postcard.
Beautiful.
Says it's like a moose, and it's
horrifying, but
bigger than you think. Chris and Eugene sent us a whole little booklet about Shore Acres State Park near Coos Bay. Do you know Shore Acres?
no.
I have never been. But he thinks it's omnibus worthy. He thinks there's early intrigue with the lumber guys.
Huh.
What little research I've done, he says, reeks of tragedy.
Oh, reeks.
Intrigue from Shore Acres State Park, Oregon. But thank you for sending us the Garden Above the Waves photo booklet. It's really kind of selling me on visiting Shore Acres the next time I'm near Coos Bay.
Well, I'm headed there.
When? You're doing your motorcycle thing?
No, I'm driving down there with my daughter. I'm taking her on a road trip against her will.
You're not taking Highway 1, are you?
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's going to take a minute.
It is. Well, I've got 3 days devoted to driving down the slow road and stopping at every traffic light in Western Oregon. But tell me more about my new vacation spot.
I have an assignment for you to find out why it reeks of tragedy.
Oh, well, all right. That's what I'm all about.
It's on a sandstone bluff above the Pacific side of Coos Bay. So there's a glass enclosed observation building where you can watch the waves crash. It was bought in 1905 by some kind of timber millionaire trying to buy stuff for his wife. And then he built like some massive residence with thousands of Tiffany chandeliers. And I wonder if something went wrong, and that's the tragedy, and that's why it's public land.
Nothing bad ever happens when you bring in a timber millionaire.
Well, it might be the kind of tragedy that ends up like going great. Like the public lands of Oregon got an amazing
house.
Got an amazing little park that they wouldn't have otherwise if the guy's family had kept it.
If my experience of parks is any indication, generally the expense of taking over somebody's crazy mansion outweighs its benefit to the public good.
Somebody, and it may have been Chris from Eugene, also sent us a sticker that says the Military Order of the World Wars
Oh.
with a patriotic-looking eagle. The World Wars?
The World Wars.
Is it some VFW rival that's only World War I and II?
But pass that over here. I mean, they're...
Sorry, did that not make it?
No, it really didn't make it.
Opposite of a Frisbee throw.
Oh, right, there it is.
There you go.
I do not know about the Military Order of the World Wars, and I feel like it might be...
Made up?
I don't know. Let's see what I find. Anyway, moving on.
It looks like it's a World War I era Pershing creation. Oh yeah, it's a veterans fraternity.
Uh-huh.
The order's title has not changed, but they do welcome members who are veterans of Korea, Vietnam, Gulf War, etc.
Oh, okay.
Those are all world wars nowadays, thanks to American foreign policy.
Yay! Get them all in there.
And-
Anytime Australia sends troops, it's a world war.
And Anne has sent us... Ooh, is this a different Lowell Thomas book? Remember somebody sent us like 2 Lowell Thomas books of his world travels?
Yeah.
Oh, I think this is a different one.
And I'm sure when it happened, I mentioned that my dad and Lowell Thomas Jr. were friends.
I bet you did. Yeah, here is Anne. John said his father knew Lowell Thomas Jr. This book isn't signed, but it has a plane. It's called Our Flight to Adventure, and it's Lowell and Mrs. Thomas, apparently, flying over 3 continents. Apparently, they were aviators.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, Lowell Thomas Jr. was... Well, that's Lowell... That book is by Lowell Thomas Jr.
Oh, you're right. It's not Lowell Thomas Sr. These are... wait, are these his 2 kids?
He probably talks about my dad in that book. They were that close buddies because they were flying buddies.
I'm going to look... I'm paging through it
it's in
now
the
to see
index.
if... is there an... Oh, no, there's no index. I'm trying to see if they ever go to Alaska.
I mean, he lived in Alaska.
Oh, well, then he wouldn't have to go there, would he? This appears to be a journey they took starting in Paris, down through Europe into North Africa, then across equatorial Africa, back up the Nile. I can't even follow this.
He's not going to have talked about my
They're
dad
going
on this
into the
trip.
Middle East.
None
Looks
of
like your
this-
dad wasn't invited.
None of this involved my dad at all.
It looks like he took his pretty pants-wearing wife, his Katharine Hepburn-style plaid pants-wearing wife on the trip instead of your dad.
Well, if
And I would too,
If I had
honestly.
a choice, so would I have done.
Thank you for sending us those things. Unlooked for things. That's what we like. You don't have to send us things. You can, but you could also look for futurelings online. The best way to support the show is to forego sending us the Lowell Thomas Jr. hardcover and instead to go to patreon.com/omnibusproject and donate your crypto.
Yeah,
We will take it.
I have a crypto wallet
You do. Oh, that's right.
from
you
our
do.
crypto show.
That's right. You do.
And a futureling did give me $10, which I think now is worth $14.
A lot of people don't know this. John makes a bad purchase themed around every show. An ill-advised purchase.
Most of them are cookies or other desserts, but futurelings from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come, but if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we wish you many goods and cheese and hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omni.